Hello and good afternoon. We want to welcome you to our essay writing and letters of recommendation webinar tonight. My name is Dr. Christy Murray, and I'm with the Psi Psi Omega chapter of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. We bring greetings to you. We want to certainly make sure that this is an informative event tonight, and we want to make sure that this is available to those who are unable to attend. Therefore, this webinar will be recorded for future use. Photos may be taken also for appropriate reporting purposes for our Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority chapters. All lines will be muted until the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. Feel free to ask questions and use the chat function to post any comments you have throughout the webinar. Questions will be answered. Some questions may be answered during the webinar, and others will be answered at the end when we have our Q&A session. We certainly encourage each of you to have paper and pencil available so that you can take notes and capture any reflections you may have in this impactful webinar we have. Next slide. Oh, thank you. All right, so our main objectives today for this webinar are to make sure that we equip students and parents, if there are any parents joining us, with valuable college admissions and scholarship information on writing essays and obtaining letters of recommendation, two very powerful and important aspects of a college admissions plan, especially during the pandemic. And so one of the things we want to make sure that we do is emphasize how valuable and important essay writing and letters of recommendation are, especially since we're still in the midst of the pandemic. So we will certainly share relevant information as such. We intend for this to be interactive. We want to make sure that you are actively participating. And again, use the chat if you have any questions or if you have any comments you'd like to share. Next slide. So I mentioned that there are multiple chapters. We have an exciting number of Alpha Kappa Alpha collaborating chapters who are joining us and who are putting together this webinar and a series of webinars for students as a part of our #CAP college admissions process, our initiative. Next slide. So I want to start by giving you a little bit of background on who we are. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated is an international Greek letter nonprofit service organization. Our organization was founded on January 15, 1908 on the campus of Howard University, a historically Black college and university. We have over 300,000 members worldwide. And right now, our current program theme for service is exemplifying excellence through sustainable service. We address a number of community needs through 5 key target program areas, 2 of which we are going to focus on today. The first is Target 1, HBCU for Life, a call to action, and the #CAP program, college admissions process, and also Target 3, building economic legacy by highlighting an entrepreneur, a Black female entrepreneur in this space. Next slide. So these are the 2 programs. The first on the left, the #CAP program, is a signature program where we focus on the admissions process. We work to assist high school students, juniors and seniors, but we certainly invite all high school students to get information as early as possible to make sure they understand how to navigate through the college admissions process. And then also we want to highlight Target 3, building economic legacy, because we think it's very important to emphasize financial planning, asset accumulation, and wealth, and entrepreneurship for that matter. So stay tuned for more on those as we advance. Next slide. So as a student, many of you probably don't know, but we certainly want to take this as an opportunity to share with you that we have a free #CAP program. All the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority chapters have local programs where they invite high school students to join their program and participate. So we're all welcoming students. So if any of if your participating chapter isn't represented on our list of 12, we're happy to connect you with a local Alpha Kappa Alpha chapter so that you can join their #CAP program. But we really want to give students personalized support with their college admissions planning activities. We help students complete college applications, get through the SAT and ACT registration and prep processes, writing essays and obtaining letters of recommendation, hence today's webinar, understanding financial aid, and researching and applying for scholarships. In our work, we have a lot of students who work to get accepted into school, but what we find equally important is how they're going to pay for it. So we do a lot of work around that too, and we certainly invite you to participate. If you're interested, this green link below is a link to the application. We'd love for you to fill out and send it back to us. I'm also including it in the chat. And we also want to make sure that if you don't fill out the application or you don't know which chapter to send it to, please feel free to send that application to myself, Christy Murray, at christymurray@gmail.com, and we will make sure it gets to the appropriate chapter. Next slide. So our agenda for today is going to be an exciting one. First, we will introduce our esteemed speaker, and then we'll move right into our essay writing and letters of recommendation presentation. And then we'll have some closing remarks. We're going to ask you to complete a brief survey. We have some more giveaways, so stay tuned to the end. And lastly, we want to give you an opportunity to have a one-on-one dialogue and get any remaining questions you have answered with our guest speaker. Next slide. So with that being said, we want to introduce the amazing, fantastic, and dynamic Alana Mbaza. She's an author and an entrepreneur, and she is the founder of Dreamland LLC. She wrote this dynamic book called Write Your Personal Statement in a Weekend. Who knew you could get it done that quick? But she's going to share with you the tips to make that happen. So with that being said, I welcome Ms. Alana Mbaza.
Thank you so much, Dr. Murray. It is such a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to be leading this workshop. Writing is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm excited to share that passion with all of you guys today. When I thought about how I wanted to share this information, a few thoughts came to mind. So generally when students think about the college essay or the personal statement, it produces some anxiety, right? Students don't think that they're great writers, or they're not exactly sure where to start their essay. And so what I want you to really think about as we go through this workshop is, instead of writing an essay, we're going to write a story, and you are the main character. And so through a series of activities and discussions, we're really going to get to the heart of what is a personal statement, what is its purpose, and how can you share your story in a way that encourages admissions counselors to see how you might be an asset to their organization. So thinking about how I wanted to introduce myself, I didn't want to do a formal bio and kind of list out all of my professional achievements. What I wanted to do was I wanted to share my story with you. So I'm going to kind of go through these images, and at the end, we'll talk about what the qualities of a good story are. So this first picture up here, this is little Alana. This is baby Alana. I was an only child raised by my mother and my grandmother. And because I was an only child and there weren't children in my neighborhood, I had to get really creative with entertaining myself. And so I turned to books. My mom took me to the Danville Public Library every weekend, and I would check out every book that they would let me check out. I think there was a limit of 10, and every week I had 10. It wasn't until I turned 9 years old and I got actually an Addie book. I don't know if you could see it because of my my filter. But it wasn't until I turned 10 that I realized, or that I saw, that there was a book with a girl who looked like me on it. Prior to that, even though I had been reading for years, I read, several books a week, I had never seen one that had someone who looked like me on the cover. And I didn't realize it when I was younger, the effect that had on me, until I was exposed to the Addie dolls. And in reading her story, I began to see myself in the book. And I started writing myself, just kind of journaling here and there. I tested my hand at some fiction stories that weren't that great. But the power of seeing someone who looks like me in a book really changed my mindset and my relationship to words and to myself as a writer. When I got into high school, I became more vocal, using my words to create change and to kind of discuss some of the issues that I saw in my high school and my community. And this is actually a picture, Fit for a King is actually a picture from a scholarship essay that I wrote in high school, kind of thinking about Dr. King's words and what they meant in contemporary times. And that one essay that took me probably 2 hours to write earned me $8,000 across 2 years. And so that was my first kind of venture into the idea that I could get paid for writing, and not just paid really well. And so I started to view my scholarship applications as part-time jobs. I won this one. I won several other scholarships by recycling the same essay, just kind of, changing things here and there based on what the requirements were. And again, several $1,000s here, there, they really started to add up. When I went to college, I had another rude awakening. Much of what I had learned in my classes didn't speak to Black history, didn't speak to my history. And so I had to relearn some of those things. And one of the books that really impacted me was Lies My Teacher Told Me. It's a bit of a controversial book, but the idea behind it is that there are things that aren't included in history textbooks. There are stories that aren't being shared. And so that really encouraged me to go find those stories for myself, but also to create the stories that I wanted to read that I hadn't been able to read when I was a young person. When I graduated from college, I decided that the best way for me to kind of share what I was learning about my history and to encourage other young people was to become a high school counselor. And so I went into college and career counseling, supporting students in thinking about what they wanted to do after high school, making plans about what they wanted to do for after high school, but also really thinking about and reflecting on their life up to that point, right? What has happened prior to senior year and how has that shaped your story? And how will that shape your next chapter? And so I got really excited about helping students think about the power of words in different ways through personal statements and creative writing workshops like this one. I also got to start book clubs all over the country with students. And one of the highlights of my career was actually using my words to meet First Lady Michelle Obama. A group of students and I created a script for a video that we then recorded in a day. And as a result of that, we won a national competition, and Michelle Obama was the graduation speaker for one of my schools in Chicago. So even though I didn't start out my life thinking I'm going to be a writer, this is something that I'm going to, make my career, I began to see at each point throughout my life how important words were to me in order to kind of reflect on my own experiences, but also to share my story with others. And so, yes, I've written 2 books. I'm actually working on 2 more, but I think what I really am hoping that students kind of gain from this story is that you don't have to be a writer to write. You don't have to be a writer to share your story. And when you're thinking about your personal statement, and we'll get into specific tips here in a second, you're essentially thinking about what is it about your background that you bring to this next chapter of your life, and how can you tell that in an engaging and interesting way? And so we'll kind of think about what that looks like, what some of the prompts are, and how to think about those. But I just wanted to share my story with you, one, because I wanted you to see what it looks like to be self-reflective about your experiences. So I could have gotten up here and said, okay, these are the things that I've done. These are the accomplishments that I had, but I really wanted you to think about, how do you look back on your life? How do you look back on some of the pictures or the images that you've captured, and reflect on what you've learned and how you've grown, because that's what you'll be asked to do in your personal statement. So that's me. That is a piece of my story. Before we get started, and I want to hear from some of the students on the call, just want to outline a few community agreements for our time today. So community agreements are really agreements that we can abide by as we're engaging in conversation and reflection. And the first one is show up. So I know people don't really like to be on camera, but because this is not a lecture, this is an interactive discussion, I want to hear from you as much as I'm going to share. I'd ask that you please turn on your camera if you're comfortable. We will be giving away giveaways throughout the call, and to be eligible to win those, you need to kind of show up and be present in the space. So I see a lot of Black screens. If folks are comfortable, please, please, please share your camera. We won't judge. We won't judge. The second community agreement is be prepared. So Dr. Murray kind of mentioned that we'd like you to have pen and paper. That's to take notes, that's to reflect, that's if you have questions, we're gonna have a Q&A at the end. If you have questions that you don't wanna forget, feel free to write those down. But yeah, bring pen, paper. If you have, an open document on your computer that you're working from, that's fine as well. We're going to be doing some writing exercises. This wouldn't be a writing workshop without it. So make sure that you have something to capture some of those notes. Be present. So pay attention and participate in the activities. I really don't want to talk to myself the whole time. So make sure that you are responding in the chat, that you are, if we have the capabilities, we might be able to bring a few people off of mute to kind of contribute to the discussion. But again, this is a flow of energy. This is a flow of dialogue. It's not just kind of like a sit and get. And the last point speaks to that as well. Talk back. Bet you never thought you'd hear an adult say that. But I want you to kind of respond to me when you're asked a question, add to the conversation. Even if you have a disagreement, like that is welcome as well, as long as it's expressed respectfully. We want to make sure that we're all learning and getting what we need to get from this session. So if I could have, I know some folks have come on camera, thank you. Do we agree to these community agreements? Can I get some thumbs up? Can I, if you're not on camera, oh, thank you, too, double thumbs up. Thank you. All right, so now it's your turn, students. So I want you to think about one of the best stories that you've heard, or just a really good story that you've heard lately. So that could be from a movie. Maybe you're watching something on Netflix or Hulu. Maybe you're binging a series. What are the qualities of a really good story? Michelle, I see you went off mute. Do we have a question in the chat? Oh, no. Okay, so I'm going to give you just a minute. So think quickly. What are the qualities of a really good story? You can either put them in the chat and Michelle will kind of bring those up. Or do we have an option to kind of take people off mute if they wanted to chime in?
Yes, they should be able to take themselves off mute. I would only request that at the conclusion of them speaking, that they put themselves back on mute, just to minimize background noise.
Awesome. Thank you for those who are coming on camera. It's lovely to see your faces. Any responses? Okay, so I see we're getting some things in the chat. Okay, so I see a great hook to get the reader interested, getting the attention from the beginning, the introduction, a good plot. Oh, I like that. Wallace, are you comfortable coming off camera and kind of talking about what you mean by a good plot? I don't want to put you on the spot, but let's talk about that. Wallace, you there? Maybe. Hey.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Mrs. Wallace. My son Vincent doesn't want to speak, but he said any story needs to have a good plot, the main, content of the story.
Yes. Okay. So the main content. Vincent, we're going to get you to talk before the call is over. Don't be shy. See, you're comfortable over there. Okay. Thank you. So like a good lesson plan, a hook is needed to capture interest. Main character, I love this, the ability for readers and viewers to see how the main character grows. I love that. So seeing growth over time. Service focused component. Okay. Yes. Yes. So we got a lot of talk about introductions, kind of that initial hook. Does it bring the reader in? Do they want to keep reading? We have a strong plot, making sure that we know what's going on throughout the story. Anything else that we want to add to the qualities of a really good story? Soraya, compelling characters. Yes. So we want to know, you know, what's going on with these people that we're reading about. We want to be invested in their story. We want to know what decisions they're making. Character strengths and weaknesses. So I love this. Layla, are you comfortable coming off mute and kind of talking about this? Why is it important to show both the strengths and the weaknesses of your main character? Layla B, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm in the car right now,
Oh,
so it's kind of awkward for me
be
to talk.
safe.
Thank you. I would say it's important for foil characters. I mean, because it kind of just makes the main character human. If you have other people to show that they have
Layla, I think we are.
strengths.
Oh.
So with characters that would, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would sometimes read stories and they would be really good on background characters. Not only, so yeah.
We were getting about every other word, but I think what you're saying is it's important to have the background characters show their strengths and weaknesses to kind of support the main characters. Did I hear you correctly? Okay. Yeah, so characters need to be relatable. They need to have dimension and layers. Yes, all of that. So I want you to think about that generally, what makes a good story, and we're going to translate that to your personal statement, right? Because all your personal statement is your story. It's a very specific and targeted story, but it has to have some of those same qualities, right? It has to be engaging, it has to be interesting, it has to draw the reader in and make them want to continue reading. And the challenge is that the admissions committees that are going to be reading these essays are reading hundreds of them. And that's not to put pressure on you, that's just to let you know that when you start your essay, you have to make sure that with that first sentence that you're really capturing their interest and you're giving them something different than they're used to. And we'll talk about how to do that as well. Thank you to everybody who participated in the chat and who came off camera. We're gonna do a raffle prize. So I think the way that we're gonna do it, we're gonna do giveaways kind of throughout this. And again, you need to be on camera to win. We're gonna go with a number, I believe. We're gonna draw a student number based on your registration, and the student is going to get a prize, which I'll reveal in a second. So I think Kanisha has the first number for the first student.
Yes, the first number, Christy, would be number 14.
Okay, so the closest student to number 14 would be Mr. Justin. He is a 12th grader.
Mr. Justin. Justin, yay, and he's on camera.
Justin.
Hey, congratulations. So you are winning a copy of my book that you can't see, but we'll get your information afterwards and we'll mail it to you. Thank you so much for participating. We'll have raffles throughout this call, so make sure you're on camera, you're participating. We're gonna have a grand prize at the end as well, so stay tuned.
And Justin, we will need your address. We did not have it included with the registration. So at the end, stick around so we can make sure we get that from you. I'll actually message you separately to get that from you.
Awesome. Thank you. Congratulations, Justin.
Thank you.
Okay, so before we get into kind of tips and tricks for the personal statement specifically, I want to talk a little bit broadly about the college application, right? Because the personal statement is only a piece of a larger package that you're going to be submitting to the colleges that you decide to apply to. So I'm going to quickly go through some of the main components of a college application, kind of their role in the application package and how you might think about them. So generally, when you're applying for a college, you're going to be submitting data related to your numbers, right? So your test scores, your GPA, but you're also going to be submitting words that represent kind of who you are, what you bring, and how other people, other adults in your life see you. So thinking about the numbers, right? These are pretty straightforward. So these are going to be your transcripts, all of the grades that you've earned up until your freshman year as a senior will be reflected on a transcript. So if you haven't already seen your transcript, I suggest that you reach out to your counselors. They're working over the summer so that you can see what's on there. Or if they're not working over the summer, as soon as you get back to school in the fall, because you want to see what the college admissions committee is going to see. And if you know that there are grades that maybe aren't as high as you wanted them to be, that's something that you're going to want to eventually address in your personal statement or in some supplemental application. But I want you to think of your transcript as not a hard and fast kind of like this document represents who you are as a student. It's only one measure that schools look at to determine whether they're going to admit you or not. So it's important. Your grades are definitely important. Your GPA is important. Things like that are important, but it's not the only thing that they look at. They also look at things like test scores, another number, SAT, ACT, or any additional subject area tests that you've taken. And so the transcripts, the GPA, the test scores reflect how you've done academically throughout your high school career, but they really don't tell the admissions committee who you are, right? And so that's where the personal statement and the letters of recommendation come in. These are your opportunity to really provide details to what the admissions committee is going to see on your transcripts or what they might assume from what they see on your transcripts. And so in your personal essay, it's really your introduction to the admissions committee. So if you were in an elevator with an admissions counselor, what would you need to share with them so that they truly understand your academic background, your personal background, your personality, and your potential for future success? That's what the personal statement is. But again, it has to be interesting. It has to be a story. And so we'll talk about how to do that. Letters of recommendation are also equally important because they are references from adults in your life who know you well, who are going to speak to some of the things that your grades, your GPA, your test scores can't speak to. So these letters are hopefully going to highlight maybe how you've overcome some challenges or maybe how you approach problem solving in a specific class and how you approach learning in general. So you really want to think about your application package in two parts, right? So there's the numbers, those things are kind of fixed, they're set. And then there are the words, right? And this is your opportunity to build on your application and really to humanize yourself when you're talking to admissions committees. So letters of recommendation are incredibly important because, again, these are references from the adults in your life who know you well, who can speak to you as a student and you as a young adult. I want to first, before we get into personal statements, kind of talk about the importance of letters of recommendation, who to ask, when to ask them, and how to get strong letters of recommendation. So first on the note, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Can we, if we can mute our so thinking about who to ask. So you don't just want to ask any teacher. I keep getting muted. You want to make sure that you're asking a teacher who knows you well and who has positive things to say about you. So this is a chance for you to be honest with yourself. If you know you didn't go to Miss Scott's class, you skipped every Monday, or if you were late every Tuesday, that's probably not the best teacher to ask. You really want to think about throughout your 4 years, what teacher has maybe had you in multiple classes, who knows you well and can speak to your positive qualities and characteristics, or even a student who maybe, freshman year, you guys kind of struggled to, build a relationship, but you had that teacher again and you were able to kind of approach that relationship in a more mature way, that teacher might be able to speak to your growth. Again, positive things. There have been situations in the past where teachers did not let students know that they were writing them negative letters of recommendation. And I have seen some of them and they are brutal. So I suggest when you are asking a teacher for a potential letter of recommendation, you ask them, hey, are you able to write me a strong letter of recommendation? The teacher's like, you might want to try to find someone else. But if they're like, yes, I have so many amazing things to say about you, or, you know which teachers you have a good relationship with. Each letter that you get needs to speak to a different aspect of you. So if you have a math teacher, for example, and generally you'll need between 2 to 3 letters of recommendation, depending on, which school you're applying to. Some won't need any, some will ask for 3. And so you want to make sure that as a general rule of thumb, you get more letters of recommendation than you need in case you need them. So if you have a teacher who can speak to your academic potential, you might want to get a volunteer coordinator who knows how you work in the community, or maybe you're going to get an employer if you've had the job for a period of time and maybe you've taken on more leadership roles in that job. So really, again, if you think about the college application package as kind of like a holistic view of yourself, you want to make sure that every piece is kind of speaking to a different aspect of you. Identify your main recommenders. So those 2 teachers, community members, church leaders who know you well, and then an alternate or 2 in case those people are unable to write for you. All right, so how to ask is just as important as who to ask, right? Because teachers, especially the teachers who who kind of like write letters of recommendation for students, they're writing a lot of these things, right? And so you want to make sure that you are mindful of their time, you are being respectful of the work that takes to go into these, and that you are providing them with every piece of information that they need to be able to write you a strong letter of recommendation. So you want to ask at least 3 weeks before the deadline, right? That gives them an opportunity to write the letter, for you to review it if you need to, and if they'll allow it to, and then to add it to your application and make sure that your application is complete before submitting. This also kind of gives you time. That teacher says, a weekend, hey, I can't actually write this letter. It gives you time to go ask your alternate, so that you're not at the last minute trying to find someone who maybe won't write as strong a letter of recommendation. Make it easy for your recommender to write good things about you. So always, always, always provide them with a resume or a brag sheet, which we'll go over in a second, because you want them. They might only know you in one specific place, right? Like your teacher might not know you out in the community. They might not know that you had a job for 3 years and now you're a supervisor or what have you. And so those are things that you want to share with your references, and not just teachers. This is community leaders. This is, employers. You basically want to give them everything they need. I do suggest following up with friendly reminders without being annoying. Again, teachers are very busy. They're writing a lot of these things around the same time in a short period of time. It's like 2 months, 3 months that they have to kind of get all these letters out. So make sure that you're being mindful of, okay, I just gave them this. They're not going to have it done, the day after, even 48 hours after. And one final tip or suggestion is write the letter yourself and give them a draft that they can then use to build on. And this serves 2 purposes, right? You'll be able to get your letter back more quickly, and you'll also learn about yourself as you're having to write from the perspective of a teacher. It's just a really good practice to think about, what would this teacher say about me? And then offering that to them. And of course, encouraging them to make edits and put their own flavor on it. But that is something that you might want to consider. All right, so going back to a brag sheet. So a brag sheet, a resume, a student highlight sheet, there are many different names for this idea, but essentially it is one document that kind of outlines all of your accomplishments, all of your experiences, your passions, hobbies, what you intend to study when you go to college. This is really kind of giving your recommender information about what your goals are, what your interests are, and what you've been doing kind of in support of that. So there are a variety of different templates. I've linked one here. So when we share the PowerPoint afterwards, you guys will have access to that. I'm going to link a few more in here. But things that should be on there: your name and your contact information, GPA and relevant classes, majors and career interest, test scores if you feel like it'd be relevant, extracurricular activities you participated in, and dates. So you want the recommender to know how long you've been involved in things, whether you started in freshman year and kind of continued to your senior year, whether you came to the organization late, it's fine. Those details will help your recommenders write more, provide more details in those letters, work experience and dates, and then any academic or athletic awards that you won. So even things that you don't, like that you got that you forgot about, you want to include them here because they may not be personally meaningful to you. But in the larger scheme of the story you're trying to tell the admissions committee, those things might be valuable. And finally, one thing that I really encourage students to do, and we'll throw this in the chat, is to look at a list of personal attributes, personal qualities, and think about which of those words really describe yourself. So if I had to choose, I'd say I'm creative, I am caring, and I am very, I'm just interested in learning more about everything. And so that might be helpful information if someone were going to write a letter of recommendation about me, to know that that's how I saw myself. But the key is to add examples, right? Not just say, oh, I'm a leader. Give me an example of when you showed leadership skills, right? Provide those examples for your recommender so that they can just kind of slip those into their letters. And then they're showing the admissions committee why you're a good fit, not just telling them. Are there any, I want to pause here? I know I shared a lot of information. I'm seeing a few things in the chat. Are there any other questions about letters of recommendation in general, how to secure them, who to ask before we move on to personal statements? All right. College essay writing tips. So the way that I want to talk about this is thinking about both the story, the actual essay writing portion of the personal statement, and also kind of thinking about how to write it. Because I know a lot of students don't consider themselves writers. They might be intimidated by the process of writing an essay, especially one that feels as important as this, right? You're essentially describing your life to a stranger who has the potential to decide whether or not you get into your school. So it can be high pressure, but I want to take some of that out, some of that pressure and anxiety out of the writing process, and give you easy tips that'll help you draft, but also finalize your personal statement. So we're going to start with do's for writing your personal statement. So this seems very intuitive, but you want to make sure that you read the essay prompt and answer it completely, right? So what you'll see when we go over the essay prompts that are in the Common Application is that a lot of the prompts have multiple questions, right? It's not just, tell us about your background. It's tell us about your background. What did you learn? What did you do? What were your, there are multiple parts to each prompt, and you want to make sure that your essay responds to each of those questions. You don't want it to be incomplete. I think an easy format to think about the prompts, and we'll kind of talk through this a little bit, is what, so what, now what. So when you're thinking about the structure of your essay, you want to first describe what happened or what your major point is, right? So maybe it was, I had a very positive experience with a doctor when I was 5 years old, and that made me want to become a doctor. So that would be the what, right? Then you want to go into the so what. So that's like, why does it matter? What did you learn? What were the implications? So that might be, you know what, I was afraid. I was terrified. I thought doctors were these people who just, stabbed you with needles or whatever. But my positive experience with this doctor let me know, hey, these people can heal, they can help, they can fix disease. And so that reflects like a shift, right, in your mindset. That is what admissions committees want to see. They want to see that growth, that reflection, that kind of understanding and self-awareness. And then finally, in your conclusion, you want to wrap it up with now what? Okay, so based on that experience, that interaction, that event, what do you plan to do next? And bonus points if you can then tie that to the college or university that you're applying for. So based on that, I started interning at the hospital, and I learned, it's not just medicine in general that I'm really interested in. It's pediatrics specifically, because I want to work with babies, and, I babysit. And the final paragraph is really where you're kind of tying it all together, and letting the admissions committee know, I've had this experience, I reflected on it, and I'm ready for the next step. So as we go through specific prompts, I'll kind of take you through that same structure. What, so what, now what? One major tip that I've only recently come to as the writer myself is that you don't always have to physically write to write. And so I encourage you to try different methods of capturing your story. I've been using the voice memos on my phone, on my Apple Watch, to kind of get my initial thoughts down, and then I go back and listen to them and then type them. So you may find that it's easy for you to talk about your story or to kind of respond to a prompt verbally, whereas it may be more difficult. You may have writer's block if you try to sit in front of a computer screen and type it out. So don't be so tied to, okay, I have to sit in front of this screen and stare at this blank page, when you can do free writes. So free writes are just basically setting a timer and just kind of whatever comes up, don't edit, just really kind of getting the story out, and then going back and thinking about, okay, how can I organize this? Interview format is always fun. If you can pick a friend or a family member who can ask you the prompt, and that way you can talk it through. Sometimes that's easier for students as well. Anything, honestly, anything that you have to do or that you can do to get the story out is going to be a positive thing. And we'll be doing a little timed writing exercise a little bit later. Stay within the word limit. Don't even play with one word. If they tell you 250, do not submit an essay with 251. You don't want to risk your future on one extra word that you probably didn't need anyway. I always encourage students, after you've finished a draft, you've had it edited, go back and eliminate words that are unnecessary. I know a lot of us have like crutch words. Mine is like then and but. Sometimes you don't need those. So just be, kind of mindful of the words. That feeds into the next one, be clear and concise. You only have a small space to really talk about yourself and your life experiences. And so each word, each sentence, each paragraph has to have a meaning. It has to be purposeful. Don't waste it. And we'll talk about, kind of what that means. And be creative. Nobody wants to read an essay that reads like, I don't know, a dry, something that nobody wants to read. You want to make sure that you're bringing the reader in using description and emotion. So you're not just talking about what happened, you're talking about how you thought about it, how you reacted to it, what you did as a result of it. Really, you're telling a story. And then finally, a do is have several other people, including at least one English teacher, if you can, proofread your statement before submitting. And this is for everyone, not just students who don't consider themselves writing. I have people proofread and edit my writing. It's just something that you need to kind of get in the practice of doing, is having people kind of critique what you've written and not take it so personally, because it's not about you, it's about helping you craft the best story that's going to get you the results that you're seeking. So then we're going to move on to what not to do as you're thinking about your personal statement. So this first one is something that always makes me chuckle when I see it in student essays, is using big words to sound smart. So yes, there is a certain tone, a formal tone that you want to convey in your writing. You have to think about your audience, right? This is a group of admissions counselors who are reading multiple essays. They are evaluating students every day. And so you want to make sure that your writing is appropriate, right, to the occasion, but also personable and really reflects your unique personality. If you're using a word and you don't really know what it means, you're probably not using it correctly, and you probably need to leave it out your essay. You want your essay to sound conversational, as if you're sharing your story with the admissions counselor, right? So if you don't say egregious in your normal life, or, you know, if you don't use a word in your normal conversation, you probably don't want to use it in your essay, unless it's a, you know, it's a term that's related to your major that you're learning about. And in that case, again, you really want to be very careful with that as well. Lie or exaggerate your story. Another thing that students always kind of tell me is, well, there's nothing unique about me. I don't have a struggle story. You know, I didn't have to overcome any obstacles. And they feel like the only personal statements that are powerful are ones that kind of show some kind of trauma or pain. And that's not the case. You don't have to lie or exaggerate your story to make it interesting, to make it engaging, and to give the admissions committee a sense of how you might be a good fit for the university. So don't lie, don't exaggerate, be truthful. What they're really going to be paying attention to is that self-awareness, that reflection that we talked about a little bit early. Don't edit your essay before it's ready. So when you are in the drafting phase, you should not be editing your essay. So when you are either talking your story out or you're writing your story out, that is not the opportunity, or that is not the time to be critical of yourself, to look at your writing and think, oh, this is horrible, because all of that does is create further resistance, and you're not going to want to write the essay if you're, you know, if every time you look at it, you're like, oh, this is horrible, and this sentence doesn't make sense. In the drafting stage, you're really just getting as many words as you can on the paper, on the computer screen. You really want too much information in the drafting phase, so that you can then kind of focus in on what your real story is and then build from there. Related to that is, don't delete anything that you've written. Ever. So I always keep a folder or a document on my computer called like old stuff or extra notes or extra sentences. And anything that doesn't fit in with whatever I'm writing, whether it's an essay, whether it's a book, I put it in that document, because you never know when you're going to need that sentence. You never know when you're going to be able to return to that to write a different essay. And so don't delete anything, even if you think, oh, this is horrible, nobody's going to write it. You can use that later and repurpose it. So keep a separate document, keep a separate voice memo file, or whatever you need to kind of keep those for later. I'm just going to do a quick check-in. The chat, yep, word limit, got a few threes in the DM. Oh, we got some finished drafts. That's exciting. It's exciting to see. Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about some of the do's and don'ts and some tips for getting a draft down or thinking about how you might start the writing process, I want to take some time to go through some of the types of essay questions that you'll encounter as you start looking at college applications. And I pulled these specifically from the Common app. The Common application, which, if you're not familiar with that, is one general application that you can use to apply to multiple different schools. There are hundreds of schools on there. And I think most schools are kind of moving in that direction to Common App if they haven't already. But Common App has a set of, I think it's about 7 essay prompts that you can choose. So you get to decide which one you respond to. And they really offer a lot of kind of flexibility in what you write and how you share your story. And so I'll go through these, keeping in mind that some schools aren't on the Common App and they'll have their own separate prompts, but these generally are the type of questions that you will encounter. So the first group of questions are open-ended questions. So these questions really kind of they give you free rein on what you write about. So the first one, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful, they believe their application would be incomplete without it. If this sounds like you, then please share your story or share an essay on a topic of your choice. So with both of these essay prompts, you could literally write about anything you wanted, as long as you keep in the general theme of how is what you're writing about going to give the admissions committee enough information about you to determine whether they want to admit you, right? So you don't want to just write randomly about your dog if you're not connecting it to maybe you want to become a vet, or maybe, you know, your dog really supported you through a time of grief and sadness. You really want to, whatever you write about, even though they've given you free rein and it's an open-ended question, you always want to tie it back to, okay, so what? Now what? Remember, the structure is what. So in the cases of these open-ended questions, you would describe what it is. So what is the background? What is the talent? What is the topic that you're going to tell us about? Then you would go into, so what? Why does it matter to you, and why should it matter to us as an admissions committee? And then finally, now what? Based on this story you just told us, what is your next step? What are your goals, and what do you plan to do? So that format can fit both of these open-ended questions quite well. Then we have questions that are a little bit more focused, right? And so these are what I'm calling the overcoming obstacles type questions. And these are also asking for some of that self-reflection and self-awareness, but specifically around things that maybe were challenges, setbacks, or quote unquote failures. So what I really want you to focus on in these particular prompts is, remember, they have multiple parts, right? So we want to make sure that in your essay, you are addressing each of these sub-questions within the larger question. So the first one, the lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Recount a time when you faced a challenge, setback, or failure. How did it affect you, and what did you learn from this experience? So you see that this one is already kind of set up in that what, so what, now what format, right? So the what is the challenge or setback? The so what is, how did it affect you? And the now what is, what did you learn from the experience? And so if you were to address each of those questions, you would have a well-balanced essay that shows self-reflection, awareness, and then connection to future goals. Same thing with the second one. Reflect on a time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. What prompted your thinking, and what was the outcome? So what was the situation? You want to describe it in great detail. You want to bring the reader into that event, that interaction, whatever it was that challenged your belief. You want to make them feel as if they're there. So if that was a conversation with a friend that, you know, forced you to think differently about something, you really want to kind of take them through that process. And then the outcome. So what happened as a result of that belief? How did you act differently? How did you think differently? How did you change as a result of these experiences? And then finally, the last set of questions, I call them positive reflections. That's not a really great term for these, but these are celebrating some of your accomplishments and thinking about positive things, positive experiences that you've had, and how those have shaped you. So reflect on something someone has done that, you know, was happy, positive, surprising. How did that affect you? What did you do as a result of that? The second one, discuss an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked personal growth. And then the final one, describe a topic, idea, or concept you find so engaging that it makes you lose track of all time. So with all three of these questions, you really, again, want to follow that same format, but you're thinking about, okay, this positive experience. You don't just want to kind of talk about your accomplishments, right? So you don't want to list them. This isn't a resume. You're really focusing on, how did that shape me? So how did winning, if you're going to talk about winning a basketball contest, for example, I don't know if that's the right word to use with that, but competition, tournament. Let's say you won a tournament. They don't just want to know that you won the tournament. They want to know why that's personally meaningful to you. So was it that, hey, I had a lot of family stuff going on, or, that I was having to deal with that was on my mind as we were practicing. I was able to put that down and reflect and be present. And you just really want to think about your own growth as a result of those achievements or accomplishments, right? It's not so much about, oh, I did this amazing thing, I won this award. How did that shape you? How did that make you a different person? How did that make you a different student? And so those are the three types of prompts. Are there any questions? Let's see. Just checking in the chat. So Layla, this is a great question. So it does not matter how big or small the accomplishment is, right? Because big or small are subjective terms. What matters is, was it personally meaningful to you? And can you convey that to admissions committee? Even if it's something that you quote unquote think is small, if you're able to say, hey, this thing happened, and this is how I grew, this is what I learned, this is how I changed, or this is how I changed my community, that is a powerful statement. And we're gonna read a sample essay here in a second, and I'll give you an example of a really strange story that a student wrote that seems like it wouldn't be a good story, but they were able to, with the self-reflection, kind of bring it back. So that's a great question. Any other questions about any of these types of prompts or how to approach some of these prompts? All right, so it's time for a raffle. So let's go with, are we gonna do a number, Kanisha? Oh, we're not.
Up to you.
Yolanda, we have a question in the
Oh,
chat
okay.
from Justin.
Okay, perfect. What is the, hold on a second, get my screens. I've written my essay, but I'm not sure if it targets what the colleges are looking for. What on the what that you talked about? So I think, so it was what? So you're describing the experience, event, achievement, the so what? So the so what is really, how did it affect you? How did it shape you? And so when you're looking at that section, if you're not talking about, I became more responsible, I became more mature, or, and this is also a great opportunity to go back to that adjectives, personal characteristics list from one of the previous slides that you're going to be sharing with your recommenders, and say, what are three, qualities that I gained as a result of this experience? Maybe I became more organized. Maybe I became, less, maybe I became more vocal in how I shared my opinion. So that section, you really want to focus on, okay, what was different in you or about you as a result of that experience? And then the conclusion is really, okay, what are you going to do now? Or what have you done as a result of that? Maybe, if you became more vocal, now you're speaking out more in community spaces, or you're sharing your story with other people. So it's really kind of a natural progression of kind of the learning. Did that answer your question, Justin? Or do you have, oh, okay, perfect. So raffle, this is so hard. Let's pick a number. Let's pick a number. It's too much pressure for me to say a name.
Okay, I have number 31, Christy.
All right, number 31, a 12th grader, Nikayla Gaines.
Oh,
Miss Gaines.
yay. Congratulations. Look at her smiling. She's so happy. Yes, congratulations, Nikayla. You will also be winning a copy of my book. Do we have her address?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Yay. Thank you. Have you started your essay yet?
I have.
Good. That makes me happy. Okay. Okay, so we're gonna move. Are there any other questions before we kind of move forward?
Alana, there is one more question. How do you identify the different prompts?
So each prompt, so as part of the common application, all 7 prompts will be listed as an option there. So you would just select one and kind of respond to that. For other colleges who don't use the common application, they'll have their own separate prompts. And so that's why it's really important to read kind of each application for all of the schools that you're applying to and create kind of figure out what it is that they're asking. What I will say is it's very helpful for students to kind of have a document where they list all of the schools that they're thinking about, all of the application deadlines, all of the prompts, how many letters of recommendation, like just go ahead and create a spreadsheet, because the biggest challenge in not just essay writing, but like the college application process is staying organized. You'll have a lot of documents that you're producing in terms of the essay as well as the letters of recommendation. And so you want to make sure that you're not losing things, you're not, kind of like putting things in folders where you don't know where they are. And so I would create a spreadsheet, have all of the essay prompts kind of there, because that'll also help you see, oh, I can use this essay that I wrote for this college, for this school, if I just change this paragraph. And so the whole idea about personal statements is that, yes, each of them are different, but there are opportunities to repurpose, to reuse essays that you've already written, so that you're not writing a new essay for every single school that you're applying to. And if you're applying to all Common App schools, you don't have to worry about that, because all Common App schools have the same essays. They may also have supplemental or additional essays, which are smaller essays where they might say, okay, why do you specifically want to apply to the psychology program, for example? And so then you'll need to know, this is what I ultimately want to do. This is how I think that this program will help me. And so you want to get a little bit more specific, but each of those essays will be as part of their college application package. And so you'll know upfront, what they're asking. That answer the question? Are there any others? All right, so students on the call, and adults too, you have been appointed as official members, admissions committee members for our fictitious Dreamland University. We are together as an admissions committee going to review a student essay and think about whether the student essay is engaging, whether it gives us enough information about the student. And then at the end of it, we're going to decide whether we're going to admit this student or not. So you guys hold lots of power. I hope you guys wield it wisely. So this is an abbreviated essay that I'm going to share with you. I'm going to read it aloud, but also show it to you, because I know people have different ways of kind of processing information. I'm going to read it slowly, but I want you to follow along. As I'm reading it and you're reading along, I want you to be taking notes about what stands out to you, what words or phrases kind of catch your attention. Think about the introduction. Is it engaging? Think about that structure that we talked about, right? The what, the so what, and now what? Does it follow a logical flow? Because after I'm done reading it, we are going, and I might actually get some volunteers to read it. After we're done reading it, we're going to kind of go through what's called a personal statement rubric. And real admissions committees use something similar. And essentially, it's just kind of like a guideline, right? It's like, does this student's introduction captivate me? And then they'll rate it on a scale depending on kind of what their admissions criteria is. And so we're going to do the same thing. I also want you to be thinking about, as we're reading it, what it's like to look at a personal statement through the lens of an admissions committee, right? An admissions counselor. So what are you learning about essays and how they look at essays that can be useful in when you write your essay? We ready? All right, so this is a lot. Can you guys see this? Okay, can I get a volunteer to read maybe the first 2 paragraphs for me? Clearly, slowly, enunciate your words. Do I have any volunteers? Feel free to come off mute. Can they come off mute?
Do you want students?
It could be either or. I just, I'm tired of hearing myself talk.
Okay, I'll do your first 2.
Okay.
My father's words stumbled through his mouth and past his lips like a stream of water sloshing over upturned, jagged rocks. I felt his discomfort in my bones. Our new neighbor's openly judgmental expression angered me, and I felt myself turn red. 20 years, my father spent carefully learning a language that somehow still betrayed him. 20 years, and my father was still an outsider. My story is the same as most first-generation Americans. My parents are from a completely different culture, and so I was raised multiculturally. I didn't quite fit in with my classmates, but I couldn't really relate to my parents either. I was stuck in the middle between 2 entirely different worlds. As a child, of course, I chose the one I was living in. My parents' native tongue was slowly becoming my heritage language. In other words, my first language was becoming my second language.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Somebody else want to read our next 2, well, I guess the last 3 paragraphs? A student, perhaps? Don't be shy. I see Nikayla looking like she wants to.
Come on, Nikayla.
Don't be shy. I'll read it. I was
going to say, I'll do one more for you and someone else can pick up after that.
Okay.
I love reading. I love reading to my students. One day in particular stands out in my memory. My father had just come home from work. He had just started his residency program. Dark circles and wrinkles surrounded his honey brown eyes and made them seem passionless, lost, and sad. My aging father slumped down on the couch and sighed heavily. Despite his exhaustion, he attempted to make conversation and ask how my day was in our native language. I was 12, the age where you start thinking you know better than your parents. Ignoring his question, I told him he should speak in English since we were in the US.
When my dad's medical practice expanded, we moved to a better part of town to a beautiful, huge house. The first encounter with our new neighbor changed everything. His name was Bill, and he was a retired banker. My father greeted him graciously, despite the fact that he was on our property uninvited. Upon hearing his accent, his demeanor changed. "So, how long have you been living in America?" he asked. My father paused, as if he knew where the conversation was headed. It was probably a conversation he had had many, many times before. 20 years, he responded with his head down. That's when I realized how wrong I'd been. I regret staying silent during our encounter with Bill. But after that moment, I never spoke English with my parents again. I stopped scoffing at the cultural traditions they practiced every year. And whenever Bill came over unexpectedly, I made sure I was the one to talk to him. I figured that at the very least, my parents should feel at home in their own home. 17 years I wasted being ashamed of my background, my heritage, my family. I'm 18 now, but I still cringe when I think about the self-absorbed person I once was. I still feel the shame and guilt of having realized something I should have known a long time ago. Scroll down, please.
Oh, sorry. Actually, it won't let me, it's full screen on my, My parents aren't the ones who are
Aren't the
broken.
ones who are broken.
Thank you so much to our lovely readers. So that is an excerpt from an essay in response to the Common App question about changing a belief. And so what I'd like us to do now that we've read it, now that we've kind of heard the story, and I hope you are taking notes on words and phrases that stood out to you, we're going to have, as an admissions committee, a discussion about some of the key themes in this story. So I'll kind of scroll back and forth so we can see the question and then come back and look at the essay. So thinking specifically about the organization and focus of this essay. So as we think about how the story progressed and how it ended, do we feel like, and this is yes, no, but also thoughts, did we feel like this essay was organized? It had a clearly written and engaging introduction, body, and conclusion. So if you could in the chat put yes, no, and then we'll have some folks will be able to come off mute and we'll be able to have a discussion about this. Did it make you want to read? Why or why not? So go ahead and vote. Seeing yes. Yes, yes, yes. It looks like, okay, it looks like it's anonymous. So yes, this essay is organized and has a clearly written and engaging introduction, body, and conclusion. What was it about the introduction that made you want to keep reading? And I'll go back so we can kind of look at it. What kind of words, phrases, or what techniques did the writer use that kind of drew you in? Somebody said it was beautifully written.
I felt like he was super descriptive, and the description pulled you in from the beginning. When he said something about his daddy's mouth sloshing, I was like, oh, what is he talking about? So immediately it pulls you in.
Right. So description, I see the build up to the story. Yep. So it wasn't just like, my dad doesn't speak English very well and he encounters discrimination. They kind of took you through an experience that highlighted, right? So that's showing, not telling. What else? What were some of the words other than sloshing that really stood out in the intro or just throughout the essay that are very descriptive, maybe? First generation, okay. Why did that, Shaniqua, you could put in the chat, why did that stand out to you, the term first generation? Or feel free to come off mute. Betrayed him. Okay, so a connection, like a personal connection, that's a great point, Shaniqua. So when you think about the essay that you're writing, yes, you're writing for an admissions committee, which are making a decision about whether you're going to get admitted, but they're also people, right? They're human. And so you want to form a connection with them through your words. And one way to do that is to be very descriptive, to bring them into the story, to use some of these terms that people can relate to and people understand. So that's a great point. 20 years, yes. So the use of like time frame and kind of like description lets you know that this is something that the father's probably been dealing with. What else? Yeah. Yes. He told the amount of time that dad may have spoken in broken English. So it gives you kind of like a, that's a little bit of tension, right? So the father's been there for 20 years, but his English is still being perceived as broken. He's still being perceived as an outsider, right? So the writer's not just necessarily talking about himself, he's talking about kind of a larger family situation that he was raised in and the thoughts that he had about that. Stop scoffing at the cultural traditions. Perfect. So far we've talked about how engaging the intro was through the use of descriptive words, using time to kind of organize the essay, bringing them in, generating a personal connection. Justin, I'm going to put you on the spot because I see you said no to our earlier question. So do you want to talk about why you didn't think that the essay was well organized?
I like the intro, and it really got my attention, but I just got a little lost when he went from talking about his father on the couch to them being like in a new neighborhood and all that. But I thought it was pretty organized for the most part.
That's a great point. So there was a little bit of disconnection, right, from because the story's not told like linearly. I can't say that word. The story's not told in order, right? So it starts off with this experience that his dad has with a neighbor, and then it's like he kind of goes back in time to talk about this broader experience that his father's has. So that brings up a good point. How you choose to organize your essay matters, right? So you can choose to do it in chronological order, like beginning, middle, and end, or you can be a little bit more creative, like this writer was, and maybe start somewhere in the story and then take a step back and then provide a little bit more detail and then come back to the reflection. So, but that's a good point. Sometimes the reader can get lost. So, okay, so let's move on. Originality. This essay is creative, interesting, and provides vivid details. We already kind of talked about this, the words or phrases that stood out. Are there any more, maybe not in the introduction, or anything else that people want to talk about? Like what makes this essay interesting or engaging? And I'll be looking in the chat, but folks can also be free to jump off. Mute. And if we don't have any additional comments, we can move.
My name is Sniley. I think that the flow of the story makes it interesting. How like it's not all written in one paragraph. I think it flows well with like the transition words that I added.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and so this is an interesting thing, right? Like when you write creatively, you can choose to tell your story how you want to tell it, right? You don't have to kind of be structured and I'm going to start off with this and then go to this, but you also have to be aware of how your essay is going to be read by other people. And even if it makes sense in your head, you have to understand that you have information that your reader doesn't have. And so when you're writing, you have to kind of take yourself outside of your story and say, what information does my reader need to have first, middle, and last to understand what I'm trying to tell them? And if it doesn't make sense to use a different order, then just tell it in order. There are ways to do that without it sounding, formulaic or boring. But again, this is when you're first drafting, you want to make sure that you get the story down, and then you can figure out, okay, maybe this paragraph would go better here, or maybe I should start with it. And you know what? Actually, when I'm editing student essays, most of the times I'm taking something that's in the middle of their essay and I'm moving it to the introduction, because the story gets good like halfway through, and really students can start with that and have a more engaging essay. So for those of you who have drafted your essays already, I encourage you to maybe play around with moving your introduction around and just see if the story, can flow a little bit better. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so our last two kind of categories on our rubric are reflection and self-awareness. So do we feel like this essay describes the students' life experiences, lessons they've learned, and how they've grown from each experience? Yes or no in the chat. I see some head nods. Let's see. Justin says yes. Okay, it's Justin approved. All right. Vicky says yes. Wallace says yes. Okay. So it's interesting, right? So folks are saying yes, even though the essay really isn't about the writer, the majority of it is about the writer's father. in that last paragraph, we really get some of that reflection of, I've gone my entire life basically believing this one thing about my culture and my heritage. And it was this one event that really kind of changed it. And based on that, my now what is that whenever this guy comes over to my house, I talk to him so my dad doesn't have to. And now I realize, like, there's nothing wrong with my parents. There's nothing wrong with my courage or my courage, nothing wrong with my heritage. And so even though, again, the essay isn't all about the writer, it does show that self-reflection and awareness towards the end. And then finally, student voice. Does this essay highlight the student's individual voice and personality and set them apart from other candidates? Yes or no in the chat. Yes, yes, yes. What were some of the words or phrases that kind of gave you a sense of like, this was more conversational, like the student wasn't trying to sound smart, wasn't trying to, kind of use big words? What were some of the words or phrases that gave you a sense of how this student might naturally talk? We got an answer in the chat. Anything? One thing for me was the sentence that said, I was 12, the age where you start thinking you know better than your parents. I could definitely see a high school student saying something like that. To me, that gives like originality, it gives authenticity. It's a little bit, kind of like, oh, okay, this student is self-aware and knows that when you're 12, you don't really know anything. Just kidding, you know lots of things when you're 12. So this essay, like I said, it's one of the Common App prompts. It's responding to a belief. And it's really a story, right? It didn't feel like, kind of formulaic. Like it just felt like this reader or this writer was giving us a sense of what was important to them and how they've grown from that experience. And that's what you want to do with your own essay. So our final decision that we have to make is based on the essay alone. We don't have test scores, we don't have GPAs or transcripts, we only have the essay. Will we admit the student to Dreamland University? And I think we have a Zoom poll. Yes, we do. Awesome. So you have not very long. I'm going to give you guys 15 seconds to vote. 5, 3, 2, 1. Oh, wait. No, I'm going to give you more time because we still need people to vote. Like we got. All right, get your final votes in before Dr. Murray ends the poll, or you want me to end it? I can end it.
Yeah, you can end it whenever you're ready.
All right, folks, we ready? Is the student getting in? Can you guys see that? Yeah, I mean, who said no? Justin. Just kidding. No, but I am interested, not to put anybody on the spot, but I would love to hear, what your thoughts were for saying no. Was it that you needed more information, or feel free to put it in the chat? Person who said no. Just kidding. Oh, go ahead, Dr. Murray.
I was going to say, I will say that this is not uncommon for a diverse evaluation panel to have different perspectives looking at the same information.
Yes, yes. And so what really happens on admissions committees is you'll have admissions counselors sometimes fighting for us, not fighting, but, like advocating for a student that they really want, that maybe somebody else rated them a little bit lower on the rubric. So just quickly, I want us to debrief this discussion. So we already kind of talked about some of the things that we were thinking about as we were going through the essay. But what did you learn? Let's get two people to kind of share what they learned from looking at a personal statement through this rubric, right? So through the eyes of an admissions counselor. So either in the chat or go off mute. The second question over here, what did you learn? Not seeing anything come in. Anybody learn anything beneficial?
My name is Shania Lee. One of the things that I took away from this is that when we were doing it or reading it and the poll came through, we didn't know any other information about the student. We just read his essay, so that shows how far a strong essay and strong writing skills can take you.
Yes, that is a great point. So that's the power of, that's why it's so important to submit a holistic college application, right? Because if you're only looking at one piece of the student's application, or if you're only sharing one piece, the admissions committee is not getting the whole story. And so it's important to make sure that each piece of your college application really presents your best self. And even if you have maybe challenging grades, or you had a year that you didn't do as well, that's something that you can address in either your personal statement, as long as you go back to, okay, and what did you learn and how did you change? So it wasn't just, I had a terrible sophomore year. It was, this is what I learned, this is how I changed, this is how I improved and got better junior year. You really want to present your best self with your college application. And I understand we are running low on time. I'm going to do my final raffle. I'm going to share the writing prompts with you guys. I do want you to spend some time kind of doing those, even though we're not going to get to them on this call. I want you guys to kind of set your timers for 3 minutes, go through each of the writing prompts that I'm going to share with you, because I think you'll find that when you start in the drafting phase and you just get ideas down and you start thinking broadly about what you might want to share, it'll be easier for you to write the essay if you're not just staring at a blank screen, because that doesn't help me. And I've been writing for decades. So don't do that to yourself. I'll share those with you. And Kanisha, are we ready for our final number?
Our last number is number 29.
29.
Okay, number 29 is Morgan. Well, no, is that a parent? Morgan Dent, are you a parent?
Morgan. Oh,
no Morgan?
No Morgan.
Okay, so the next number closest to that one is Layla Baldwin.
Layla B.
Layla B, another senior. Woohoo!
Yay, congratulations. So we have her address.
No, we do not. Layla, if you could send me a direct personal message in the chat, I can grab your contact info.
Yay, thank you. Okay, so like I said, I'm gonna share I'm gonna share these at the end, so you guys have these. Are we gonna do, yeah. So I think we are ready for our closing remarks.
So we are now at our closing point. I do want to let everyone know that I am Gracie Bowers. I am the program chairman for Gamma Delta Omega, located in Portsmouth, Virginia. On behalf of the chapters here and our signature program, #CAP, we extend a thank you to our speaker, Ms. Alana Mbanza, who demonstrated her expertise here today. Part of our sorority's international theme is demonstrating excellence. Her presentation demonstrating excellence with an outstanding presentation on essay writing and letters of recommendation. The college admissions process, we know, is a very serious matter, not to be taken lightly. And preparation is a key factor in guaranteeing your success as you move forward. I hope that the attendees here have gleaned some information that you can utilize in this process. Students, we hope that you don't forget some of the tips that you have learned. Parents, we appreciate your support and we want you to continue to remind your students of these important tips. Members and other guests, we appreciate all that you do and your attendance and support as we try to provide this very invaluable service to the community. It's always important to help us know how well we did. So in a minute, there should be a survey that is placed in the chat. In the meantime, we do want you to direct your attention to those, go back a second, to those to our upcoming events. We have a boot camp that is an SAT prep webinar on August 8th. On August 14th, there will be a virtual Youth College Excellence Summit. And on August 29th, there will be the boot camp part 3 that will prepare you for the ACT. All right. We hope that you can attend one or all of these events. If you look in the chat now, we should have the survey. If you will go ahead and complete that, you simply click on the link and tell us about your needs or future topics. So is it there? All right, it is there. All right. We'll give you a second to do that. Another fun part of our webinars are the giveaways. As you saw earlier, random numbers were chosen to select the winners, and you had to be present to win. And so now what we're going to do is come to another portion. We're going to do another giveaway. So, Ms. Kanisha, do you have a number for me for our first giveaway?
I do, number 40.
Okay. Ms. Sydney, is number 40 present?
And what we're giving away is a copy of my very own College Planning Strategies I Wish Someone Had Told Me book. And it has a lot of great information for students. So number 40 is Shaniqua Roan. Actually, she is a parent. So if you're a parent and you have a student, we're happy for you to accept it on behalf of your child.
Thank you so much. My girls are very young, but I will give it to my nephew. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaniqua. And she had mentioned earlier that she had 2 nephews that she was sharing this information with. All right, so we are going to do another giveaway of that College Planning Strategies that I wish someone had told me. So, Ms. Smith?
Number 7.
Number 7.
The closest to number 7 is Christopher Frazier, 11th grader this time. Christopher, are you on?
He put in the chat, yes, he is on.
Okay, congratulations. You also get a copy of the college planning book.
Okay, and so now, if you go to the next slide, we have a grand prize. Now, you've heard the words of Ms. Mbanza today. If you would like to be the winner, you need to stay on. We're going to get one more number. Ms. Who's doing that for me? Kanisha.
Yes. The final number, and I think this person, according to her rules, you have to have your camera on to win, would be number 23.
Let's see. That would be Kendall Swain, S-W-A-I-N. Is this individual's camera on?
Is the camera on?
Kendall is my daughter. Kendall is my daughter, and she is just a sophomore, so I'd like to decline and offer that to someone else.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Christy,
Right.
Never too early, though.
It is never too early. In fact, we encourage the earlier you plan, the better off you'll position yourself.
Absolutely.
Christy, do you want me to pick another number, or you'll pick the next person in line?
I will pick the next person. Let me go down the list. Sorry, just bear with me just a moment, making sure that they're actually here. All right, how about Zaire Nobles?
I see Zaire. I don't see the face. Oh, nope, not yet.
Zaire Nobles, are you here? Camera on?
Camera's not on. I only see the name.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go to the next person on the list. Vincent Wallace.
Vincent Wallace. Oh, was that Vincent sitting on the couch, comfortable?
Oh,
Yay!
so Vincent is our grand prize winner here. And it looks like you are going to receive essay editing services with Ms. Alana Mbanza. That will include drafting as well as 2 rounds of edit and revision. And I'm sure that she will provide other details as to how you are going to get that information.
Yes. Dr. Murray, if you could share the contact information with me, I will reach out.
Yes, ma'am. We will make sure we provide it to you.
Congratulations, Vincent.
Thank you.
Okay. And the last thing I want to say before we go back to the question and answers from Ms. Alana, I think she said she would address some additional questions and answers. I want to invite you, even though you saw all of our upcoming events, this is a time that we're putting a challenge out there for you. We want you to attend the SAT prep on August 2nd from 2 to 6. The event is free and open to the public. We are challenging you to come in groups. We want you, if you're a junior, invite your entire junior class. If you're a senior, go ahead and invite your entire senior class. If you are on any type of team, whether it's football, basketball, debate team, go ahead and invite your entire team members. Any clubs that you're in, invite them. Your youth departments, your church, just spread the word. And we want you to know registration is open. And if you're interested in seeing any of the past webinar recordings and videos, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Invest in Others. And here are a list of some of those webinars. Okay. That concludes my closing. RFK.
All right, thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure to speak with you guys, to hear from you about how you're thinking about personal statements. I can stay to answer questions. Feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to mute. Let me know what questions you guys have. And if you think of them later, here is my email and my my website. Feel free to send me an email. If you have questions later, I'm happy to answer them. And we will be sharing the slide deck, correct?
Yes, we will. We'll be sending out an email with links to the survey, the slides, and our upcoming events. I do have a comment, Alana, that I want to share that you may want to expand on. When it comes to essays and letters of recommendation, I want to just emphasize and remind everyone that you need 2 different types. When you're writing or getting letters of recommendation, you need your recommenders to provide you a letter of recommendation for college admissions, which is worded a bit differently than those that you'll use for scholarships. One is written, I think that Justin should be admitted into your college or university style. And the other is written in terms of, I highly or strongly recommend Justin to receive your scholarship style. And so as you're asking recommenders to write letters, make sure they give you 2 versions so you can use them all school year for both purposes.
That's a great point. And I would also say for the scholarship, in your brag sheet, you want to identify all of the scholarships that you plan on applying to. And if they have specific criteria for the recommender that they need, you want to make sure that you provide that as well, so that those letters are actually fulfilling the requirements that they are made for. Any other questions?